I never thought I'd see such an iconic piece of mid-century furniture covered in layers of thick salmon-colored paint, but then I found this one on Facebook Marketplace, and I'm going to try to remove all this paint and restore this piece back to something beautiful again. I thought it might be fun for you to guess not only what I paid for this, but also what it might be worth once restored. One of those numbers might surprise you. Paying this much for something that looked this rough felt risky, but I'll share with you what I plan to do with it. This isn't just any dresser. This is from one of the most iconic American mid-century modern furniture lines from the 1960s, and today it's one of the most sought-after vintage dresser styles in America. The seller wanted $750. We agreed on $500, and I drove 2.5 hours to Illinois to pick it up. But the price to repair this piece gets much worse. What am I going to do about these missing drawer pulls, some of the most expensive replacements I've ever seen? My name is Barry, and it's good to be with you again. The vintage furniture market is still strong. The challenge is, can I restore this neglected piece to sell for a profit? I'm going to brush on a thick coat of paint remover to the top of the dresser first, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what's underneath, mostly because I already know what to expect with this piece. With its tapered arches for the top drawer pulls, there's no question this was manufactured by the Broyhill Furniture Company out of Lenoir, North Carolina, in the 1960s, and is part of their most iconic line, the Brasilia. Thankfully, we don't have to speculate with this one. There's clear evidence both by the label on the inside of one of the top drawers, as well as the stamp on the back side. I removed all the drawers to make sure I don't need any replacement parts, then put them all back in for the paint removal. Some of you may already know the history behind this piece, but for those who don't, just wait until you see where the inspiration came from for this design. I've removed a lot of paint from old furniture, so I wasn't surprised to see that all the paint did not come off with the first coat of paint remover. That's especially the case when there's a layer of white primer below, still clinging to the wood grain. Rather than try more aggressive methods, I've just learned to be patient and continue to use paint remover until all the paint has been removed. What I hadn't realized yet at this point were a few major challenges that I'd be forced to face with this restoration project a little later. Using a metal scraper like this can be risky. If I slip, I could gouge the thin veneer, but at this point, I'm more than comfortable with this tool, and I've found it to be the best tool for this job. As I continue working, I'll use No. 2 steel wool, this afterwash product, and fine brass brushes to remove the paint and primer from the fibers of the wood grain. I've learned that if I don't find a way to remove every trace of this white primer, it will stand out once I apply a new stain. This can easily ruin any major project, and the monetary value would be severely diminished. As I began removing the paint from the base of the dresser, I realized this piece was going to be more of a challenge than I first imagined. Here's a better look at how many of these mid-century furniture pieces were constructed. This is a thick substrate made of engineered pressed particle board, covered with a thin sheet of veneer. This walnut veneer is still real wood, but thin sheets were much cheaper than using solid pieces of a desirable hardwood like walnut. I was hopeful that I could remove all this paint without removing the base of this dresser, but this is a really special piece of furniture, and it only felt right to take the extra time to do this the way I knew was right. Of course, I did break a few dowels in the process, but that's okay. I'll fix those later. With the base completely removed, I felt like I was committed to this project. I closed up the shop for the evening and went inside to do some more research. I knew a little bit about this Broyhill furniture line, but what I found next really helped piece this story together, and it's often preserving the history behind these old pieces that bring me the most joy from this work. The Brasilia line debuted in 1962 and was inspired by Brasilia, the newly built capital of Brazil. The city had become internationally famous in the late 1950s for its futuristic, modernist architecture by Brazilian architect Oscar Niemeyer. His buildings used sweeping parabolic curves, arches, and dramatic geometric forms, which heavily influenced the look of the furniture. Oftentimes, a story is better told using additional resources, and these short clips will hopefully do just that.
Rising high on the central plateau, Brasilia, a splash of brilliance on the dark and distant heart of a nation. The interior opens, and a slumbering giant awakes. Brasilia, capital city of a new Brazil. Out of a primitive past, the daring palace of a president.
Have you noticed lately how so many content creators claim they found the worst example of something, or the cheapest example in the entire country? In some cases, maybe it's true, but they don't often deliver quality content based on the misleading thumbnails. Most of the time, it's just a little exaggeration, hoping for a few extra clicks. I actually find it kind of funny, because one look at this salmon-colored painted dresser, and you might assume this is the worst example of an iconic Broyhill Brasilia piece anywhere in America. But in this case, I know for a fact that it's not. Just take a look at this Brasilia tallboy I found several months ago. Someone actually covered the original walnut veneer with grass cloth wallpaper, then proceeded to paint the remainder of the dresser black. Thankfully, this piece will play a part in this current restoration project. This Brasilia dresser has more monetary value than many of the pieces I have worked on, so it's especially important to remove all of the hidden paint. For that reason, I decided it was best to remove the top altogether, held in by just a handful of screws. Knowing at this point that this project would take me much longer, I realized for some viewers who also do this kind of restoration work, it's important to understand the financial side. I plan to resell this dresser once refinished. I already have $500 invested, and it's about to get much worse. I'll share what I expect to sell this for later in the video, but for now, it's important to share with you that I earn additional revenue from ads placed in my videos, as well as from dedicated brand deals. I'm sure this sounds like an easy gig for me, and I do feel blessed to be in this position, but it took years of dedication and behind-the-scenes work to get to this point. With that said, I'm not as concerned about the profit margin when it comes time to resell this dresser. If you're simply trying to flip a piece of furniture for a profit, then it's important to understand the market in your area, then determine the costs and time associated with a big project like this. I was hoping to avoid this, but I'm sure many of you were thinking of this already. Why not just remove the arches from the drawer fronts? These appear to be glued on and secured with nails, but weren't too difficult to remove using a scraper and a heat gun. It was surprising to see how much paint I would not have been able to remove if I hadn't removed these arches. This project actually took me months to complete, working on it for a few hours every week, and for me that's sometimes necessary, just to have the patience required for this much paint removal. This is peak season for restoring furniture here in the shop, when the weather's nice and the doors are open. I don't really have much time to be inside preparing meals, so having prepared meals from Cook Unity has been a blessing. Cook Unity delivers chef-made meals right to your door, fully cooked, fresh, never frozen, and ready in just a few minutes. These are restaurant-quality dishes created by real chefs. For most meals, I just preheat the oven, throw the meals in for 10 to 15 minutes as directed, and actually sit down to something that tastes homemade without spending a lot of time in the kitchen. You can scan the QR code on each meal to find out more about the chef who created the meal, as well as additional nutritional facts about the meal. This dish by John DeLucci features a salmon fillet rubbed with chili seasoned salt and is served over a refreshing salad with capers and tangy artichokes. They've got tons of options too. High protein, gluten-free, low carb, whatever fits your lifestyle. I'm sharing with you some of my personal favorites from the week. I even tried the breakfast menu, which was amazing. So if you want to eat better without sacrificing your time, check out Cook Unity. By choosing Cook Unity, you're choosing to support me, and I can't thank you enough. Go to the link in the video description now to try Cook Unity and get 50% off your first order of chef-made meals delivered fresh to your door. Once again, Cook Unity is offering my viewers 50% off their first order. Click the link in the video description below and use my code MADCITY to try it out. No matter what you enjoy doing, maybe you can relate to how I felt with a major project like this. Sometimes I get so caught up with just trying to keep up, make a video, get paid by a sponsor, sell the furniture, and move on to the next project. I get so caught up with that I forget to stand back for a moment and appreciate the slow but beautiful transformation of an iconic piece that has already lasted 75 to 100 years. Do something long enough and your skills will likely be better than others, and it's okay to stand back and be proud of your work, but it's important to also stay humble. The challenging moments always have a way of humbling me, but I just feel grateful to be healthy enough to do this work that I love. I always strive for perfection, but I've never achieved perfection, and I don't think I ever will. But none of that really matters if your work still brings you joy. Most of the dresser is stripped, and I can now use the Surf Prep sanders to sand the veneer with 150 grit, 180 grit, and 220 grit. With the drawers, the base, and the top sanded, I called it a day, and the first thing I did the next morning was replace the wooden dowels that I damaged during disassembly. I first tried drilling a small hole and inserted a wood screw, hoping with a little heat I could loosen the adhesive enough to pull these out in one piece. This method didn't work, so I just continued to increase the size of the drill bit until the dowels were completely removed. This probably isn't the ideal method, but it did seem to work. Not only did I have to make sure I was drilling the holes at the correct angle, but also the correct size for a tight fit. Here's a better look at many of the tools I used for the paint removal and sanding. And with the dowel replacement done, I thought I'd finally move on to removing more of the paint. When I removed more of the paint from the joints, it didn't sit right with me to leave the other joints this loose, so I completely disassembled the base and sanded every single piece. I've been delaying the bad news with this project long enough, so in a moment, I'll share with you what I had to do next. It's often difficult to show on camera, but there is still so much white primer stuck to the fibers of the wood grain. So as I sand, I'll also pour on acetone and scrub the surface with a fine brass brush. Since the day I picked up this poorly painted dresser, I knew this moment was coming. I would have to decide what to do about the 8 missing drawer pulls, beautiful, solid brass arches that make this piece so unique. The first time I looked up 8 replacements, I was encouraged, $139, but I quickly realized that they were $139 each, bringing the grand total for just the drawer pulls to $1,112 before taxes. I simply had to find another solution, but for now I have what I need. I'll just borrow 8 original pulls from this Brasilia Magna I purchased several months ago. I laugh at the statement now because honestly, who has a random Brasilia dresser sitting in the house for all the pulls to just be borrowed from? The original pulls were sealed with lacquer, so I'll dip these in acetone for about 30 seconds, then rinse with water under the sink. I also polished them gently with Barkeeper's Friend in the powder version, then proceeded to reseal them with lacquer for brass. This is of course just a temporary solution, because that will only severely diminish the value of the other Brasilia piece with no drawer pulls. It might seem like I'm just that lucky, but truth be told, I paid $1,000 for that unrestored piece. I discovered a few dents on one of the drawer faces. This is common when working with old furniture. I applied some water to the surface, then used a damp cloth and a hot iron to slowly lift the dents. The steam caused the wood fibers to swell, and although this doesn't always work completely, there is tremendous improvement. Once dry, I can gently sand over the repairs with a palm sander. I want this new finish to be close to the original finish, so I'll apply this medium brown walnut wiping wood stain from Mohawk, pouring it carefully so as not to spill any. Having used many stains from the big box stores on hundreds of furniture pieces, I can honestly say this stain is superior to most. I'll wipe it on with a cotton rag, then wipe off the excess immediately. At this point, you may notice small natural imperfections in the walnut wood grain. I've learned through many online forums that most professional refinishers wipe on a dark glaze following the first coat of sealer. This often adds depth to the color and helps conceal any natural imperfections in the wood grain. I wasn't comfortable doing this for the first time over such a valuable piece of furniture, so instead I tried it on a piece of sealed walnut veneer to show the comparison. I should have waited a little longer than 15 minutes for it to get tacky before wiping it off, but the idea is to get more depth in the color, like you see on this original Brasilia piece in my workshop. I worked a little out of order with this dresser, and that was mostly to keep my sanity. I won't show you more sanding or paint removal beyond this brief moment for me to say, it took about 3 to 4 more hours to remove all the paint from just the body of this dresser, using a variety of scrapers and hand sanding blocks. I'm slowly putting this piece back together after it's stained, and will prepare to spray everything with a lacquer sealer before brushing on some color to the epoxy repairs. I'll first mix some lacquer sealer with a little blush retarder. This will help slow down the dry time and prevent blushing or a cloudy finish. I'll spray the first light coat using the HVLP sprayer at about 45 psi. I like to spray the insides of the drawers with a sealer. This gives everything a fresh, clean, new look and feel. Another disappointing discovery was finding that 5 out of the 6 tracks for the drawer slides were missing the ball bearings. These aren't just pieces you can easily order, so I took the tracks from the grass cloth Brasilia and inserted new bearings by simply bending down the tab. I thought I was filming the entire process, but something went wrong. Regardless, I added synthetic oil to the ball bearings and now have enough pieces for this current project. So what did I decide to do about the missing drawer pulls? From the same Etsy seller, I found new solid brass reproductions for $69 each, for a grand total of $582. Seems a bit outrageous, and I cried a little inside, but the reproductions are incredible, and most can't tell the difference unless you look for the serial number on the back of the originals. In the end, I just felt this piece would lose part of its identity without them, but now I'm in trouble. I'm about $1,200 into this project, and I haven't even accounted for my labor yet. I'm pleased with the decision, but I'm also curious, what would you have done? I'll gently sand the first coat of sealer with a 320 grit sanding pad, then wipe it clean with wax wash remover and a cotton rag. As with many mid-century pieces, the trim is often made using a solid fruit wood like ash, which is lighter than the walnut veneer on the drawer fronts. I'll attempt to match the color with different toners. Along the way, I discovered a few more damaged areas that needed repairs, but this didn't set me back too much. There were a few small spots where the veneer was sanded through completely, mostly on the corners, and I probably did that this time. I'll simply mix up some blend-all powder with some lacquer sealer and brush in some color to match the existing wood grain. For the final few steps, I'll mix in some dye stain to the second coat of sealer to help blend all the colors of this piece together. Then for the final top coat, I'll spray on this Finisher's Choice clear lacquer and call it good. This Brasilia double dresser is one of these 4 pieces that I currently have to refinish, so I'm glad to have learned from this piece. Based on sales receipts, I estimate this refinished dresser to be worth somewhere around $1,700 in most metropolitan areas. I might just break even on this project, so I'm grateful to Cook Unity for making this restoration possible. As I wrap up this project, I want to share something that a lot of you have asked about recently. Yes, something did happen to Coda, and I promise I'll be sharing that with you very soon. For now, I can't thank you enough for your continued support. My name is Barry, and I'll see you again very soon. Goodbye for now.